This is Inside Ulster with James McKee and Donna Traynor.
The INLA has shot dead one man and wounded another in a Glengormley shopping centre. The Belfast taxi driver murdered by UFF gunmen who walked through an unlocked door. And a clergyman says the families of two Protestants killed in Garva wanted no revenge attacks.
Good evening. Early hours after the UFF shot a Catholic taxi driver as he watched television in his North Belfast home, another man lay dead, yet another had been wounded. This afternoon's murder by the INLA of a Protestant man in Glengormley has been condemned by the Ulster Unionist Mayor of Newtonabbey and by the SDLP in the area. It brings to 6 the number of people killed by terrorists here in the past 7 days, the most violent week so far this year. Our first report is from Stephen Walker.
At around 2:45 this afternoon, two gunmen walked into the Northcote shopping centre in Glengormley. They made their way to a fishing tackle shop and opened fire on two men inside. One of the victims, who was in his 40s, died. The other man, who's in his 20s, has bullet wounds to his back and leg. He was taken to hospital, where he's described as ill but stable. Police believe the two gunmen escaped in a waiting black Hyundai car. It was later found abandoned in the car park of the Yorkgate shopping centre. Newtonabbey's Mayor, Councillor Arthur Kell, arrived at the scene shortly after the shooting.
There's absolutely no necessity for this whatsoever. Really, I'm at a loss for words to just describe the people who would carry that out. Well, I could describe them, but you know, the language would be terrible to suggest what I would call.
This latest attack means that 6 people have died in violence here in the past week.
Loyalist terrorists carried out last night's murder of a Catholic in the New Lodge area of North Belfast. The police have described it as a cowardly sectarian killing. Joe McCloskey was shot dead in his home at Leper Street. Minutes later, the UFF issued a statement admitting the murder.
Despite the frequency of loyalist attacks in the New Lodge area, Joe McCloskey felt no need to lock his door. Last night, the UFF were able to walk in and shoot their victim at close range.
This is yet another cowardly, savage sectarian attack on an innocent man or on a man sitting in his front living room watching television.
Mr. McCloskey worked as a taxi driver. He was married with 6 children, the eldest 12 years old.
I knew him as a constituent. He was a hard-working and offensive person, a father of 6 children, a very likeable person. He had no political affiliations whatsoever, to my knowledge.
Sinn Féin held a protest outside North Queen Street Police Station today. After Mr. McCloskey's murder, they've once again claimed there was collusion between the security forces and loyalist paramilitaries. A senior police officer said the security forces had been in the area before the attack took place, but he rejected outright any suggestion of collusion. An SDLP councillor says politicians must come together to lessen tension in areas like New Lodge.
I believe that there are responsible people within the unionist ranks in the City Hall, and I believe that they can respond very positively to what is the best possible initiative given the present circumstances, and that is to discuss the whole issue of partnership, to see how we can cooperate and work together on the Belfast City Council and give leadership to the whole community.
Last night's murder has also been condemned by the MP for the area, Ulster Unionist Cecil Walker.
Well, priests and ministers from North and West Belfast have been giving their reaction to the recent increase in violence in the area at a conference being held today at Corrymeela. The conference on sectarianism was organised to look at the underlying causes of such violence.
The picturesque North Antrim coast is a world away from the ugliness of sectarianism, but it's here around 40 clergy are debating that issue and its impact on life in Northern Ireland. Among them, a Presbyterian minister whose church is only a few hundred yards from the scene of last night's murder in Belfast. She said killings like that feed fear in both communities.
I think as a congregation we would first of all want to say that we abhor all kinds of violence and would want to stand against this and say that it only encourages fear and engenders fear within both communities, and fear then feeds into more violence, and we would want to say that that's just not the way to go here.
A priest from West Belfast said he believed the way to break down barriers and stop killings like last night's was through conferences like those at Corrymeela.
We demonize one another, you know, we fear one another, and so it's very important to understand, you know, the processes of sectarianism, to be able to help the people and to see that the only way out of it is to bring people together, to help them to listen to one another, to hear one another's stories. And enormously important and valuable things happen when you try to do that.
A Presbyterian minister has urged politicians to stop pandering to the IRA. The Reverend Raymond Kelly was speaking at the funeral of one of the 2 Protestant men murdered by the IRA in Garva on Sunday. He said the security forces must be given the resources they need to defeat terrorism. Kieran Turridge reports.
More than 1,000 people gathered in Garva this afternoon for the funeral of 28-year-old John McCloy. Local schools and shops closed and many people stood along the route to pay their last respects. There was a poignant moment in Main Street as the cortege paused briefly at the scene of Sunday's double murder. When mourners made their way to Garva Presbyterian Church, they heard the Reverend Raymond Kelly describe the murders as a violent outrage upon humanity. He said John McCloy's upbringing helped him form a non-sectarian attitude, and he knew nothing of bigotry. He said politicians must stop pandering to the IRA, who he termed vile, wicked and evil. He said the security forces must be given the resources they needed to defeat terrorism.
The people that I have been talking to over the past 3 to 4 days now really feel so pessimistic. They really feel there is no hope, that all avenues have been tried and the politicians have come up against a stalemate.
Meanwhile, around 1,000 people gathered at the Mullahinch Road home of Alan Smith this morning. There were emotional scenes as the coffin, draped with a Glasgow Rangers jersey, Alan Smith's favourite team, was taken from the house. His mother was too distressed to attend the funeral. As the cortege made its way to Ahadui Parish Church, the only survivor of Sunday's attack, Patrick Skelly, helped carry the coffin. At the church, the Reverend David Slater said the whole community had been numbed. Alan Smith had friends on both sides, and no one could justify the taking of life, sentiments echoed by the Archdeacon of Derry.
I would appeal to them to stop this terrible carnage and slaughter, and to stop it now. And the last thing I would like to say is that on television last night, I heard of a Roman Catholic being killed as a reprisal for the deaths of these 2 young men. And I would like to make it abundantly clear that this was not done in the name of either of the families, and neither has it their approval.
Alan Smith was buried in the adjoining cemetery.
The Taoiseach Albert Reynolds has demanded clarification from the IRA about its continued use of violence. He was speaking to British and Irish parliamentarians in Dublin. Mr. Reynolds questioned whether the Republican movement can agree on its response to the Downing Street Declaration. He's also said he hopes to bring the process of clarification to a conclusion in the near future.
Albert Reynolds used his speech to appeal once again for an end to violence. He appeared to question the ability of the Republican movement to deliver peace. He said people were becoming impatient for peace as a result of the delays and procrastination. He asked if the violence was a sign that the unity of purpose and discipline in the Republican movement is not as strong as is often supposed.
Sinn Féin leaders have claimed that the achievement of peace is the top priority of their organisation. How did they expect this to be believed by the public when they see Republican violence on the rise again? What does the murder of the 2 Protestants and 7 policemen this year contributing to moving the peace process forward? Is it to be interpreted as showing a deep-seated contempt by some activists for the peace efforts of the 2 governments?
Mr. Reynolds then also addressed the Loyalist paramilitaries.
Their nightmare of being forcibly coerced into a united Ireland against the will of a majority has no reality and will not happen. The people of the South do not want it to happen and will not allow it to happen. They have no justification for murdering innocent people.
The Taoiseach told the British and Irish parliamentarians that in any negotiations the Government of Ireland Act as well as the Republic's constitution would be on the table. On the issue of clarifying the Downing Street Declaration for Sinn Féin, he said both governments had sought to provide this on any reasonable points that might be required. And he said that he hoped to be able to draw the process of clarification to a conclusion shortly.
We're sorry the sound quality on that report wasn't what we would have hoped. When I spoke to Jim Dougal a short time ago, I asked him what Mr. Reynolds meant by the process of clarification being concluded shortly. Was it a sign he was losing patience?
Oh, I think he is losing patience, and I think that everyone who was at that meeting today is losing patience with the Republican movement. I think Mr. Reynolds was suggesting that the opportunity for clarification of the declaration is now there if Sinn Féin want to take it up. A couple of weeks ago, the Secretary of State, Sir Patrick Mayhew, said that if there were issues in the declaration which genuinely puzzled Sinn Féin, and the British government accepted that they'd not been made clear before, then they would look at them in that light. I think what Mr. Reynolds might well be suggesting is that Sinn Féin should perhaps make a list of what they want clarified. They could be clarified, and then perhaps once and for all, we'd know if the Republican movement was going to accept the Downing Street Declaration.
Now, he hit out at paramilitaries on both sides, but in particular, how significant is it that he's in effect demanding of the IRA that it clarifies why it goes on killing?
Well, I think that this is probably the hardest tone that Mr. Reynolds has taken with the Republican movement since the declaration was published. He's suggesting that they should clarify now why the IRA continue to kill. And I think he's also questioning the commitment of the Republican movement to peace. And there also seems to be at least the suggestion of some doubt in his mind as to whether or not the Republican movement is united in how they should now proceed.
Jim Dougal, thank you. Well, responding to Albert Reynolds' speech, Sinn Féin's Northern Chairman said it contained much interesting and welcome commentary on some of the core political issues at the heart of the conflict. But Mitchell McLaughlin said the stalemate that now exists was not of Sinn Féin's making. He said the responsibility rested solely with the British government.
Now a reminder of the headlines so far this evening. The INLA has shot dead one man and wounded another in Glengormley. UFF gunmen walked through an unlocked door to murder Joe McCloskey in Belfast. And a clergyman says the families of two Protestants killed in Garva wanted no revenge attacks.
A man's been killed in a coach crash near Ballymena this afternoon. 2 passengers were injured and have been taken to hospital. Martin McGinley reports.
The coach went off the road at the Bally roundabout south of Ballymena at around 3:45. The man who died was driving. A man and a woman on board have been taken to Antrim Hospital. It's thought their injuries aren't life-threatening. It's understood the bus was on its way from Coleraine to Belfast. At this stage, it's not known what caused the accident. It's believed no other vehicles were involved.
A member of the Royal Marines has appeared in court in Belfast accused of 5 terrorist-related offences, including collecting information likely to be of use to the UFF. He's Derek William Charles Adjie, whose address was given as Thieful Barracks in Lisburn.
The Royal Marine, who's 23, appeared before Belfast Magistrates Court in plain clothes. He was charged with conspiring to murder a leading Republican, Brian Gillen, and conspiring to murder members of the IRA at a house in Andersonstown. He was also accused of conspiring to murder employees of the West Belfast taxi firm, Community Cabs, at Mona Road. There was a gun attack there earlier this month. All the conspiracy offences are alleged to have taken place between January and April. The soldier was also charged with collecting information during that time about people whom he suspected of belonging to the IRA that would be useful to the loyalist terrorist group, the UFF. He faced a 5th charge of having photographs and drawings on April the 23rd that would be useful to terrorists. A detective inspector told the court that when charged, the defendant made no reply. The inspector said he believed he could connect the defendant with the charges. The soldier was remanded in military custody. In a statement issued yesterday, the RUC said it had instigated the investigation and had received full army cooperation and assistance.
The BBC has learned that the government's powers to block investigations of alleged discrimination are to be challenged in the European Court of Human Rights. The Newry contractors Tinley Brothers want the court to rule on a clause in the Fair Employment Act which allows such blocking on security grounds. Our security correspondent Henry MacDonald reports.
Tinley's legal battle began in 1985 after they failed to win a £1 million contract to demolish a part of Ballylumford Power Station. The contractors complained to the then Fair Employment Agency that they were the victims of discrimination. The case reached the High Court in Belfast. But investigations into their claims were halted after Northern Ireland Electricity appealed to Tom King, who was Secretary of State at the time, to put down a special banning certificate on the case. This was known as Section 42 of the 1976 Fair Employment Act. Under this section, cases into alleged discrimination can be stopped on the grounds of safeguarding national security or of protecting public safety or public order. Now Tinelly's, through the Fair Employment Commission, is seeking to challenge that order in the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Civil liberty groups such as the Standing Advisory Commission on Human Rights say the challenge has wider significance.
The Standing Advisory Commission on Human Rights has a brief which is concerned with human rights in Northern Ireland. But I think that it does connect to a number of matters in the rest of the United Kingdom. So you have to look at this issue in the context of the Scott Inquiry. And I think that overall, if the government were to lose in this case, which is a big if, but if they were, it would be a further problem for them in trying to maintain that a minister's word is enough to stop litigation in any area.
Mid-Ulster MP, the Reverend William McRae, knows of constituents who have been caught in the vetting net, but he still sees the need for such powers.
As far as Europe is concerned, Europe knows fine well that they do a vetting process as well. The United States certainly does a vetting process as well. It's a reality of any administration for the good and well-being of the community as a whole. And I think it would be hypocritical for anyone to suggest it is not happening. It is a reality.
The Fair Employment Commission declined to comment on the forthcoming case, but a spokesman at the Department of Economic Development said the government would be facing a legal challenge to Section 42 in the European Court. The landmark case is expected to be heard in Strasbourg sometime later this year.
In the United States, 6 men have been acquitted of charges of conspiring to smuggle weapons, including bomb detonators, to the IRA. 3 of the men, who stood trial in Tucson, Arizona, are originally from Northern Ireland. 1 is from the Republic and 2 are Americans.
The trial in Tucson began in early March. Since then, the jurors have heard masses of evidence concerning the purchase of 2,900 of these detonators in Arizona. Security sources believe the detonators ended up in the hands of the IRA and have been used in dozens of bombs and explosive devices. The prosecution alleged that 2 men seen here on surveillance video with their backs to the camera came to Arizona in November 1989 to buy the detonators. But neither Seamus Moley nor Kevin McKinley were on trial in Tucson. They've already served jail sentences elsewhere in the USA for the purchase of a Stinger missile, and their lawyers are hoping they won't have to face trial again for the detonators deal. It was never claimed that the 6 men who were in the dock had ever been to Arizona or had been directly involved in handling arms. Instead, they were alleged to have played a support role in financing or shipping the detonators. The evidence against them consisted largely of bugged telephone conversations.
Hello?
Hello, is Kevin there?
No, he's not here at the moment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed him.
But the tape recordings played in court were indistinct and often unintelligible. Midway through the case, the judge said much of the evidence was circumstantial and dismissed some of the charges against one of the accused, Pat Moley. So the jury's final verdict was predictable. The outcome is embarrassing for American law enforcement agencies, given the massive resources they put into this case.
Now sport, and Jim Neely begins with some disappointing news for athletics fans. This year's meeting at the Mary Peters track has been cancelled.
The Northern Ireland Amateur Athletic Federation announced this morning that the meeting, scheduled for the 4th of June, would not be taking place, ending 10 years of major international competition. The news, which has come as a considerable shock to athletics in particular and sport in general in the province, wasn't altogether unexpected.
There are 2 key factors which conspired against us at the start of the year. One was the reduction in the network coverage, the number of meetings down to 6 this year in the UK, which is a substantial reduction in previous years. The other totally unforeseen factor is the Andy Norman affair and the controversy and the adverse effect which it had on potential sponsors. Both those factors were outside the control of Northern Ireland Athletics, but unfortunately the end result is there's no meeting here this year.
So what can we do locally to make sure that the meeting could come back, or indeed how is it going to affect the development of the Mary Peters track, because quite a bit of money has been put into that?
It makes the development of the Mary Peters track even more important when we go into discussions with the British Athletic Federation to emphasise to them the importance of this meeting for Northern Ireland. And we're not just talking about sport here, we're talking about the image of Northern Ireland. It's very important that locally we're seen to be supporting it. One of the key factors there are facilities at the track, and it's very pleasing for us to see that some provision will start to be made there in the autumn. The other factor is getting support really from central government regarding the continuation of this meeting. Those two areas we'll be picking up in the coming weeks.
In boxing, the main supporting bout on the Chris Eubank-Ray Close King's Hall bill on May the 21st will involve Argentina's WBA World Light Middleweight champion Julio Cesar Vasquez defending against the former European champion Bernard Razzano of France. The very first time. But the 7,000 King's Hall fans will be solidly behind Ray Close, whose preparations are going so well, he's in a lyrical mood.
Well, that's right. Not need to judges this time, for Eubank won't pass 9, and then his belt will be mine. Just short and sweet, you know.
Like the fight, you hope?
Yes, exactly.
On Saturday, May the 7th, 70 riders representing 19 countries will be at Ballykelly for the third round of the 1994 World 500cc Motocross Championship. And it's the very first time that the 500cc class has been seen at World Championship level in Ireland. Holland's Gert-Jan van Deurne leads the title chase by just 5 points from the defending world champion, Jackie Martins from Belgium. Yes, apologies for the loss of sound at the top of that. Well, in local soccer, it was Linfield's night at the Oval when they defeated Coleraine in the Wilkinson Sword League Cup final last night. It was Linfield's second trophy of the season, and they've now gone 29 games without defeat. Both goals came just at the start of the second half. A cross from Dublin's Pat Fenlon wasn't cleared, and Scotsman Gary Peebles nipped in to beat David Platt. And a minute later, the Blues made sure. Stephen Beattie's corner caused problems, and Raymond Campbell did the rest. So Linfield can now concentrate on their 2 remaining league games against Newry tomorrow night and on Saturday against Glentoran. In rugby tonight at Ravenhill, the Scottish Saltires make their annual visit to the province to take on Ulster in what's always an attractive fixture, and it's a 7:30 kick-off. And Davy Smith and Wayne Pollock, both from Ballymena, have been drafted in as late replacements on the left wing and in the back row for the Saltires. Finally, golf. Ronan Rafferty has turned down an invitation to play in this year's US Open. He was fined $5,000 there 4 years ago. That's the sport, Seamus.
Now, BBC Radio Ulster and Downtown Radio have won one of the broadcasting industry's highest honours, not quite as high as those motorcyclists were going. 2 stations have been named as joint winners of a special Sony Award for what was described as their outstanding service to the community in Northern Ireland.
It's 6:30. Good morning and welcome to the start of today's programmes on BBC Radio Ulster.
BBC Radio Ulster came on the air in January 1975, initially transmitting for just 30 hours a week. Now it's 116 hours, packed with authoritative news and current affairs, as well as entertaining and distinctive programming. No stranger to the industry's accolade of a Sony Award, the station has now won 7 in the past 3 years. At a glittering ceremony in London hosted by Michael Aspel, it was Terry Wogan who presented this latest award.
And I'm very privileged and honoured as an Irishman to present these. Go to Downtown Radio and BBC Radio Ulster, both broadcasting in Northern Ireland. And welcome to collect the awards, John Rossborough from Downtown and Pat Lockery from BBC Radio Ulster.
It is always deeply encouraging to find fellow professionals recognise the quality of what we do. And also, I think, to recognise that rather more than turmoil and terrorism emerges from Northern Ireland, that there's a great deal of talent there as well, and that Downtown Radio and BBC Radio Ulster bring that talent in through to the broadcasting world.
Our commercial radio colleagues at Downtown Radio have just celebrated the station's 18th birthday. Radio Ulster's Sean Rafferty picked up a silver award in the local Broadcaster of the Year category. And Radio Ulster's Your Place and Mine programme also received a silver award.
And well done to all our colleagues. Now a quick look at the weather forecast. Becoming cloudy through the evening with outbreaks of rain, mainly in the west. A lowest temperature of 9 degrees Celsius. After a cloudy start tomorrow with some light rain in places, it'll become mainly dry with some sunshine. Top temperature 16 degrees Celsius.
And now the main news again this evening. The INLA has murdered one man and wounded another in a gun attack in Glengormley. Catholic father of 6, Joe McCluskey, was murdered by UFF terrorists as he watched television. The clergyman says the families of the 2 Protestants killed in Garva wanted no revenge. And the Taoiseach asks whether Republican leaders can deliver peace.
We'll have a local news update at 5 minutes to 7. Now it's time for the 6 o'clock news with Anna Ford and Andrew Harvey.